Assalamu alaikum, inshallah you're well guys. So recently with the cost of living going up, salaries are being stretched even further. And it doesn't matter whether you're unemployed or someone who's had a corporate career for a long time. Everyone is feeling the squeeze. So inshallah in today's video, I wanted to speak to you about 3 ways you can maximize your pay. Now simply put, the ways that you can earn more include getting a pay rise in your current role, being promoted to a more senior role, or leaving your current company and securing a role elsewhere where you manage to get more money or benefits. Firstly, I'm going to speak about getting more pay in your current role. Now for most organizations, they will have an organized pay structure in place. So getting a pay rise is dependent on firstly your organization's objectives, how well they're performing in the current market, and secondly, how well you are performing. So your year-end performance rating is going to be linked to the pay rise that you receive. Now, in a large organization, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to impact significantly the percentage pay rise you receive. So as an example, say you're doing really well in your particular year-end rating, you may be entitled to between a 5 to 7% pay rise. You can't really go outside of those brackets. Whereas in a smaller organization, there's less structure. So where the firm was willing to give you maybe a 2% pay rise, with negotiation, you may be able to get that up to a 5% pay rise. But even in that instance, guys, you'll only get that pay rise depending on your company's objectives, how well they're doing, and how well you've performed as an individual. You wouldn't get a pay rise just because you asked. Therefore, you can understand why it's important to get the best rating possible in your year-end appraisal. And your year-end appraisal is linked to your objectives, which are typically drafted at the beginning of the financial year, and how well you perform against them. You may find your objectives are split into 3 areas. So firstly is your day-to-day role, how well you're performing against that, certain projects you have to deliver in the year, any additional responsibilities that you may have. Secondly, you may have learning or development objectives. How are you growing as an individual? It may be taking a particular course or completing a qualification. And then thirdly, you may have company objectives in place. So the company or organization achieving minimum revenue growth or a minimum percentage of profit. Now, obviously, guys, in that instance, you won't have much control on the company objectives. So it's very important you focus on the things which are in your control, which is the learning and the personal or day-to-day objectives. So my first tip, guys, is make sure that your objectives are SMART. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And the reason why is because there's no point having objectives in place which you know you're going to struggle to meet, which aren't realistic, which you won't achieve by the time you get to your year-end appraisal, because that's going to impact your year-end rating, which will then have an impact on your pay. It's also important that you have measures of success in place. So often people will meet an objective, but it's not quite clear what you have to do to go the extra mile. What counts as a meets expectations and what counts as an exceeds expectations. It's very important you define that at the beginning of the year when you're drafting your objectives. A common trap that I've fallen victim to, and so have many others, I'm sure we've all been guilty of this, is we won't take our objectives seriously. We'll get to the beginning of the financial year, quickly draft out some objectives. So we've tick boxed the exercise, we've done the bare minimum, and then we won't talk about objectives again until mid-year, and then we'll have a year-end appraisal. But you can't let that happen because you're letting things go out of your control. If you just let your objectives be, you're not having catch-ups with your line manager, how will you know when you've fallen behind a particular objective? And by the time it gets to year-end, it's too late. Your manager has probably made a decision that has already been agreed by the higher-ups on what your rating will be. And you can't have an impact on that anymore. So it's important that even when you've drafted your objectives, you're catching up regularly with your line manager to understand your progress. If you're meeting those objectives partway through the year, what do you have to do to exceed expectations? What do you have to do to get the best rating possible? So to summarize, guys, if you want to max out your annual pay rise, you need to have clear, SMART objectives in place. You need to be catching up regularly with your line manager to monitor progress throughout the year against those objectives, and you need to have clear measures of success. It needs to be clear in your head what you need to do to exceed those expectations to get the best rating possible. The second way is by getting promoted, but I know, guys, it's easier said than done. Sometimes that position simply doesn't exist. It may take a while to facilitate that move, or we may have to create that position for ourselves in the organization's hierarchy. To get promoted, firstly, there needs to be a business need, which is where you may have the greatest challenge. So why should they promote you? Has there been a significant change in the business's operations? Do they now need to take on more people, where they now need a manager to manage said people? Or has someone in the position above you left and now there is a gap? Sometimes there may not be a business need. You could be doing a fantastic job consistently exceeding your objectives, but there's just no need for a manager. Or you're doing a great job, but the business know that you can be easily replaced if you chose to move. If you are in that position, guys, I wouldn't hang around if you want to progress, because if you're doing a fantastic job, the organization should have a development path in place for you. Once you've identified a business need or a career path that you want to progress, it's not just about smashing your objectives. You need to be taking on additional responsibilities to show that you are ready for the next stage in your career. But inshallah, guys, I'm not going to spend too much time focusing on the how to get promoted piece, because I've already done a video on this. It's called How to Get Promoted Faster. Inshallah, do check it out because it goes into much more detail than what I'm talking about in today's video. So if you do want to progress in your current company, please do give it a watch. The third way may sound like the best, which is simply hand in your resignation and look for a role elsewhere. And given current market conditions, things are looking quite good. So a lot of companies are now hiring because they're moving into the post-COVID period, and salaries are quite good too. I'd say generally speaking, you may be able to secure a 10% pay rise if you were to move elsewhere. And it sounds like the best way because this is normally the quickest way of getting that pay rise, because your notice period may be a month or up to 3 months. So within 3 months, you could be sitting on a lot more money than what you're currently on. And if you were to go through the promotion route or the annual pay rise route, you may find yourself waiting around for at least 6 months before your company recognizes you and gives you that pay rise. Now, when it comes to looking for a new role, it's very important you showcase your skills, what you can bring to that role in your CV and at the interview stage, because when it comes to offer stage, it's very likely that HR and the hiring manager have had a detailed conversation and they've already decided on what they're willing to offer you in terms of your package. The role may have a salary banding and they may decide to offer you towards the lower end of the scale, especially if they know it's still a pay rise from your current role. That's why it's important, guys, to be careful when you're discussing salary expectations and what you're currently on as part of the application process. Whereas if you showcase your skills and experience during the interview process, although they may start at the middle of the salary band or even towards the lower end, there will be more room for negotiation. They will be willing to offer you more because they know you're the right person for the role. And in this instance, it's absolutely fine to ask for more money, guys. Companies aren't silly. They know there's a cost of living squeeze and impact happening on everyone. So it's absolutely fine in this current market to ask for more money. The only thing to be mindful of, guys, is that when you move roles, you're starting your relationship building, you're starting your career at that particular company from scratch. So actually, you may find it longer to get promoted in your new organization compared to staying in your current role, maybe working for a year, working really hard, trying to secure that promotion where you'll be on the same package anyway. Something to bear in mind, guys, that even though the salary is higher and you'll secure that initial pay rise quite quickly by moving roles, you may delay further promotion and lose out on a bigger pay rise later on in your career. Lots of things to think about there, guys. Inshallah, I've given you some useful tips to help you develop and grow in your career. As always, any questions or queries, please feel free to comment below or message me on Instagram.